An Italian playboy boy carried out the largest robbery in the world, which baffled the policemen and led them into a game of cat and mouse over many years of theft that made him a wealthy man and a professional thief. The police were unable to reach him and reveal his identity. So who is this boy? What are the most prominent thefts he committed? How did he manage to stay out of the eyes of the police commanders? Questions and others that will be answered in the next minutes of today's video. But before going into the details, we invite you, our dear viewers, to press the like button and the subscribe button, as well as activate the bell feature to communicate with everything that is amazing, interesting, and strange. Let's continue. In January 1972, Valvrio Picci, 17 years old at that time, had just begun his criminal life, which was with great fanfare when he helped one of his comrades blow up a television station tower in his hometown of Iscalpancino, located in northern Italy. There, Picci was considered just a boy. Another good thing had taken the wrong path to turn bad, but no one knew how bad it could get. Both his father and brother worked as lawyers, while his mother ran a clothing store, where the family was resigned to the idea that Vij was a spoiled child who could never be reformed. By the next day, he was arrested at the family home after it was confirmed that he had participated in the bombing. With regard to prison, Vecchi considered the period of his sentence there as an educational period, where he made many friends and benefited from the experiences of fraudsters and thieves. After he was a novice boy and not an expert in life, he became fascinated by the world of crime, especially the field of theft and burglary, and this is what he will seek to make his next work. When he was released, Vecchi began to steal, as he went to rob post offices in neighboring villages. He had the audacity and courage to steal at that early age. According to Detective Gold James, his audacity made him famous, and Vecchi quickly followed a clever plan whereby he would enter the post office with a gun and a newspaper, and when he approached the clerk near the counter, he would point the gun at him and cover it with the newspaper without the rest of the people seeing it. When the employee surrenders and hands him all the money, he quickly goes out and finds his friend waiting for him. They ride on a motorcycle and then quickly flee away from the place. Unfortunately for him, fame has a bad side, as Vecchi soon found himself back in prison again. In prison while he was waiting for his sentences to be issued. He invested time and continued his learning from the major criminals there, and after he reached his late 20s, he became an accomplished and professional criminal. Returning to the town where he lived, Vecchi found himself on the list of the most dangerous criminals. Whenever a robbery or theft occurred, he was included on the list of suspects, and every time something happened, his house was come to and completely searched in search of evidence of his involvement in that incident. The continuous police pressure on him began to freeze his activities. Vecchi realized that the Italian authorities would not surrender until they put him under ban. To avoid this, Vecchi packed his bags and left the country and initially traveled to Switzerland in order to open a bank account there away from the eyes of the police. He also used passports. He forged it without being able to arrest him, and in the end he settled in London, where he had some friends there. At first, he did not speak English. He was not even able to ask for a cup of coffee. He was able to study the language and learn it quickly, and then quickly return to his usual work, as correspondent James Nicholson points out that Vichy had remained discreet in London for a not very long period, all in order to study banks, jewelry stores, and all the places from which he could get money at any time, whatever he wanted, and this is exactly what happened where he was. During his first year in London, Thackeray was able to rob 5 British banks, as he entered and left quickly. What helped him in that was that the bank security guards were not armed, as was the case in his home country of Italy. Then Vecchi quickly became a wealthy man. Valvrio Picci believed that banks were created for other people to put others in them, while he preserved his money by putting it in a private deposit box near his apartment in London. During that time, he lived a good life in one of the most luxurious neighborhoods in the capital of the United Kingdom, which is called John Street. Wood, when he wasn't stealing, was pretending to be an Italian journalist coming to learn the English language, and everyone who was with him at the time assumed that he came from a rich family. Thanks to all that wealth, Vecchi was able to make great friends. As for him, the deposit center in Nestridge was full of treasures. Here he began planning to be. The deposit center was his next hit. The center was located in one of the most prestigious neighborhoods in London, and the basement in which the deposit boxes were located was equipped with the latest protection systems. through his monitoring and inspection of the place from the inside, Vichy learned that there would be several problems if he wanted to carry out his operation, as the locks worked automatically. In addition to the presence of 2 thick walls of bulletproof glass and video surveillance, he realized that the normal method of storming the center and threatening with weapons would fail, so he decided to follow another plan, by changing his appearance to suggest that he was a successful businessman, as he began placing some of his deposits in that center on a regular basis and was studying. The place becomes more spacious with each new visit, as this operation was going to become the largest theft in Vichy's professional history, and to carry it out, it would take a mastermind and some additional internal information. During the following days, he continued to study the center more closely, as he was able to determine each time when a person entered and how much time he spent before leaving. He also formed a friendship with the owner of the center, who was called Latif Barbs, all of this to find weak points in his center. While Vichy was at dinner with Latif and his girlfriend, an idea occurred to him. He had an idea that his friend Latif might be more useful in the theft. After that, Vichy took the first step, which was when he started going out with her more and made her become attached to him. Then as the days passed, little by little, Latif's friend named Valeria revealed to him that the latter was suffering from financial problems and was also using illegal substances. His project is expensive, and with all the information he collected, Vichy was able to formulate his promised plan. Stealing millions of dollars required him to scrutinize millions of details. Vichy concluded that he needed powerful tools to break into the boxes, as well as a safe house in which to hide all the stolen items. He also knew that after entering there, he must hurry and not wasting time to leave before 5:30, which is the time when the security officer is present, and to enter and leave quickly. He realized that he would need help, and Vichy went for several days to one of the bars in order to recruit young crooks. They could be satisfied with a small amount in exchange for his help, because he wanted to keep the money for himself alone, and his goal was to finding people who build muscle only, while the planning and management is his alone. They will also work for a small price, and the police will not suspect them. When Vichy became in possession of the plan and the assistance, what was missing at that time was choosing the appropriate day to begin the robbery, which would immortalize his name as one of the most famous thieves in the world, and by the second day, July 10th, 1987, that was the promised day. Vecchi, accompanied by one of his assistants, entered the deposit center, wearing official suits, where he introduced him to his friend Latif as a new client. Latif was very happy to receive a new client. He appointed one of the employees to take Vecchi and his friend on a tour in the center to tell them about the strength of the security present in all the facilities. The employee took them to secret rooms located in the basement. This was the only place in which there were no cameras. Vecchi took out his gun and pointed it at the employee and threatened to kill him if he did not do what he was told to do. Then he and the employee headed to the warehouse where the employee asked. From the guard there, he asked the guests about the security features of the warehouse. After entering the room, Vecchi pointed his gun at the guard as well, then tied him up. However, there was still another one, the security guard. So Vecchi threatened the first employee, then took him to his office and forced him to call the guard and ask he brought him some papers, and the three quickly waited for the guard to arrive. Within minutes, the guard arrived in the room before Vichy pinned him to the ground and handcuffed him. Now there was nothing left between Tachi and his gang and their target. Vichy then contacted the remaining gang members via the walkie-talkie and ironing machine, but they did not respond, so he had to. Vichy decided to leave his first assistant in the building, accompanied by the guards and the employee, while he took him out and adopted the rest of the individuals. This is what he did, as he found them sitting in a cafe waiting for a signal. Vichy learned that the reason for their failure to respond to the call was that they had turned the device on another frequency. This mistake had wasted some time on the gang, says James. Jalady, a former investigator with the Scottish police, said that Vichy knew that every minute that passed was not in his favor, because through the surveillance that he was experimenting with every day, he realized that there was a routine security check taking place every day at exactly 5:30, and at exactly 4 o'clock, Vichy and his gang began to. At work, he had only an hour to multiply hundreds of boxes, and according to journalist James Nicholson, his robbery was similar to Aladdin leaving the infidel with his silver and gold. But this time in the 20th century, time was running out for the gang, as they began using a huge hammer to break the boxes and take what they contained, and now is the time. It had come, and although they had opened only 120 boxes out of the 5,000 that were there, they needed to get out of there quickly, and while they were preparing to leave the place, Vici noticed that he had cut his finger and blood was pouring in the place. But without paying attention to the matter after that, before leaving, he headed to the office, where one of his gang members was accompanied by the center employee. Then he asked for help to go out because he wanted to settle a matter with the employee. What none of the gang members knew was that the employee was Latif, the owner of the center, who was the provider of internal information. Then he gave him some money and made him leave. Then he headed out accompanied by the rest of the center members. The gang filled their car with bags full of money and fled, and by 5:30 the security guard arrived and found the place empty. After searching a little, he found the workers tied up in one of the rooms. He discovered, after it was too late, that the center had been robbed, so the police informed him, and one of the investigators came to interrogate the Ethan employees, in addition to Latif, the owner of the center, who played his role in a professional manner. What the investigators did not know about was that Latif he arranged for new employees who had never seen Vici to enter the center, and they were the ones who witnessed the theft. Since they had never seen him before, they could not identify his features because he was wearing black glasses. No one could provide any information useful to the investigation. Latif also disabled the cameras, which was due to a malfunction. In the system, Detective Goldie, who was supervising the case, issued the size of the theft and how the gang planned it. Detective Goldie, through his research into the crime scene and his knowledge of the precision of the planning, believed that someone from the inside was part of the theft by participating in it or by providing information in exchange for money, and despite this he was unable to identify it, just as the police were unable to determine the stolen amount, but they stated that it had exceeded the threshold of $2 million. There was little evidence except for a small fingerprint stained with blood, so the investigators realized that they had to work quickly before the money was disposed of and hidden, and what no one knew was that Flario Vecchi had already left the country by tomorrow. The news of the robbery of the Nesterbig Deposit Center had spread throughout the country, as the owners of the boxes lined up outside the center in complete astonishment. Each one was listened to individually in order to determine the stolen amount. Journalist James Nicholson also covered the case. It was reported that it was the largest theft that had occurred at that time, as it was not permissible to rob a deposit center located in the middle of the city of Kingston. According to him, this place was where the famous members of society from the aristocratic class, as well as some members of the royal family, put their savings. Every day someone came out to declare that the stolen amount is greater, as during the 4 days of investigation, the total stolen amount changed from $5 million to $40 million, divided into money, jewelry, and other valuable treasures. Among those treasures were 22-carat diamonds owned by the family that controls Mercedes-Benz, which its price was estimated at £1.5 million sterling. However, it was difficult to determine the actual size of the stolen amount, but what all the newspapers and investigators agreed on was that this step was the largest armed robbery in years. Scotland Yard police investigators undermined their efforts further, and over time, and with the investigation, the investigators became convinced. The gang had a hidden hand that worked with them from within the center, so the investigators then attempted to match the fingerprint that was found at the crime scene. And despite searching all the criminal records, its owner could not be found. So they sent it to Interpol, whose data, after determining the identity of the fingerprint's owner, revealed that it belonged to an Italian person. His name is Valerio Vecchi. Investigators were ordered to investigate Vici's life, and some knowledge that he was a man with a playboy inside him who loved to play and spend the night. Their suspicions about the presence of someone who helped him inside the net breach center were confirmed. They also expected that the person who provided him with information was a woman. They returned to Vici's life after learning that he had a luxury car and a large house. In addition to a lot of money, the investigators realized that any girl working at the center might be attracted to him without resistance. While the police roamed all of Britain in search of the suspect, he continued his game, and one day he asked for an expensive sports car and returned to the country to get it, according to Detective Goldie. Vici could have fled far away and never returned, as he could have fled to Brazil and avoided arrest. On the contrary, he continued to leave and return to Britain as if he was provoking the police. Based on the information provided by the Italian authorities, the British police kept Vici's potential accomplices under surveillance, But despite this, nothing new was achieved, and people were appointed to monitor Vichy. After a month of development, the police saw Vichy leaving one of the most luxurious hotels in the city of London, riding in a Ferrari, so an arrest warrant was issued for him while he was waiting to obtain a license. Export to take my escape to South America. During the investigation, Valerio Vecchi confessed the name of the person who cooperated with him from the inside, which the police could not believe, as Latif Parfs was that person. Detective Goldie says that they could hardly be convinced that Latif was Vecchi's assistant, and had it not been for his confession, they would not have he was believed, as he was the last person the police could suspect, due to the way he staged the scene with great professionalism. Latif admitted that one day Vichy came to him and said to him, "Frankly, I have an offer for you, which is that I will rob your deposit center in exchange for sharing the spoils." And in the months before the theft, Latif visited the insurance company for his business, amounting to $1 million to $3 million, and this was a strong reason for Vichy to help in the theft. Detective Kagoldi adds that Vichy was aware that Latif's financial situation was deteriorating and complicated, and he also learned through his girlfriend that he was still using substances. Vichy was in a relationship with one of the largest dealers of these substances in Britain, and this is what made seducing Latif very easy. In the end, $10 million out of $60 million was recovered, consisting of precious stones, currencies, and precious metals. The amount was transferred to the Scottish police. $1 million of the total $10 million found was in the form of £150,000 sterling of diamonds and rubies, as well as Carter watches weighing 100 pounds, £25,000. Their owner was searched for, but they were not found. They were sold at the Anani auction in Christras in December 1992. Returning to the thieves, Latif Parver was sentenced to 18 years in prison, while the rest of the gang members were arrested and thrown into prison and sentenced. They were sentenced to different periods, while Valerio Vecchi was sentenced to 2 years in prison. During his detention, Vecchi also confessed to committing 5 other robberies that were in England and have not yet been solved, which brought the number of thefts he committed in both Italy and England to a total of 54 robberies. In a statement to Detective Goldie during Vichy's interrogation, the investigator asked him, "What would you have done if we had not arrested you?" Vecchi replied, "I would have gone to another place and then opened a bank account and robbed that bank." Thus, the investigator knew that it was only a matter of time before Vichy would go to carry out another robbery if not. He was arrested after spending 4 years imprisoned in England. Valerio Vecchi was extradited to his native Italy to serve the remainder of his sentence. Despite his long criminal history, he was released there on the condition that he would return to prison every day at night. He would also remain under supervision even if he committed a crime. Another, even a small one, he will be detained and another period will be added to his current sentence. In the end, the British authorities were able to arrest the most dangerous thief in the world, who was able to carry out the largest robbery in history, from which he earned more than $60 million with his gang, and if it were not for the fingerprint that he left there, but that is one of the... His thefts were unsolved for many years until he admitted it himself at the time of his arrest. Waiting for your beautiful comments and constructive criticism, we bid you farewell. Our dear viewers, with the hope of meeting you in an upcoming video with an exciting and strange real story.